Marcus Jen had always been the quiet one aboard the research vessel Harmony. While his crewmates debated alien politics in the mess hall or competed in virtual reality games, Marcus preferred the solitude of the observation deck. He would sit there for hours, watching stars drift past the viewport, his dark eyes reflecting distant suns as he sketched in his worn notebook. The other humans on the ship found him strange. Captain Rodriguez often joked that Marcus spoke fewer words in a week than most people used in an hour. Dr. Sarah Kim, the team's xenobiologist, had tried countless times to draw him into conversations about the fascinating alien cultures they encountered. Marcus would nod politely, offer a brief response, then retreat back into his silence. "That guy gives me the creeps," whispered Engineer Thompson to his buddy during their shift. "Never talks, just stares at everything like he's calculating something. Probably some kind of sociopath." Marcus had heard similar whispers his entire life. In school, teachers called him withdrawn. In the academy, instructors labeled him antisocial. Even his own family worried about his tendency to observe rather than participate. They didn't understand that Marcus wasn't antisocial, he was studying. Always studying. Learning. Watching patterns that others missed. The Harmony was part of the Terran Federation's cultural exchange program, designed to build relationships with alien civilizations across the galaxy. The crew consisted of diplomats, scientists, and cultural specialists, all carefully selected for their ability to communicate and connect with diverse species. Marcus was technically listed as a cultural observer, though most crew members assumed he was there to fill some bureaucratic quota. Their current mission had brought them to the Kythera system, home to a proud warrior culture that valued strength and honor above all else. The Kythera resembled massive reptilian humanoids, standing nearly 3 meters tall with scales that shifted color based on their emotions. Their society was built around trials of strength, courage, and endurance. To gain their respect and access to their advanced defensive technologies, humans had to prove themselves worthy. Captain Rodriguez had spent weeks negotiating with the Kythera High Command. The aliens had finally agreed to consider a formal alliance, but only after the human crew demonstrated their worth through what they called the Deathworld trial. The name alone had sent shivers through most of the crew. "The trial takes place on Kythera Prime's moon," explained War Master Thrax during their final briefing. His scales rippled with deep purple patterns that the translation software indicated meant serious challenge. "Your species claims to come from a Deathworld, as many others do. We have heard these boasts before. The trial will prove whether your claims have merit." The moon in question was a hostile wasteland of jagged rocks, toxic atmosphere, and predatory creatures that had evolved in the planet's harsh gravity. The Kythera had been using it as a proving ground for their warriors for thousands of years. Survival for 7 days meant acceptance into their culture. Failure meant, well, the Kythera were politely vague about the consequences of failure. Marcus sat in the back of the briefing room, notebook in hand, sketching the intricate patterns on War Master Thrax's scales. He noticed details others missed, how the alien's posture shifted slightly when discussing certain aspects of the trial, the way his claws extended minutely when mentioning the moon's predators, the brief flicker of what might have been respect when he spoke about previous successful candidates. "The trial is voluntary," Captain Rodriguez announced to the crew after the Kythera delegation left. "I won't order anyone to participate. But we need at least 5 volunteers to meet their minimum requirements." Hands shot up immediately. Thompson and his engineering team volunteered, eager to prove their worth. Dr. Kim stepped forward, driven by scientific curiosity about the moon's ecosystem. Security Chief Barnes practically demanded inclusion, viewing it as the ultimate test of his training. Within minutes, they had 8 volunteers. Marcus remained seated, watching the enthusiasm around him with his usual quiet intensity. He had no desire for glory or recognition. But something about War Master Thrax's manner during the briefing nagged at him. The alien warrior had mentioned previous successful candidates, but his scales had shown subtle stress patterns when discussing human participation specifically. Marcus suspected there was more to this trial than simple survival. "What about you, Marcus?" Captain Rodriguez asked, noticing his silence. "You've been studying Kythera culture longer than anyone. Your insights could be valuable." Every head turned toward him. Marcus felt the familiar weight of expectation, the pressure to speak when he preferred to listen. He could see the doubt in their eyes. What could the quiet observer possibly contribute to a trial of physical endurance? "I'll go," he said simply, his voice barely above a whisper. The reaction was immediate. Several crew members exchanged glances. Thompson actually laughed. No offense, Marcus, but this isn't exactly a library research project. We're talking about survival on a hostile moon. Marcus nodded, accepting the criticism without defense. He had long ago learned that explanations rarely changed people's perceptions. They would understand soon enough. The next 3 days were spent in preparation. The volunteers underwent intensive physical conditioning, weapons training, and survival briefings. Marcus participated quietly, his performance adequate but unremarkable. He seemed more interested in studying the briefing materials about the moon's indigenous lifeforms than practicing combat techniques. Dr. Kim tried to engage him during one training session. "The atmospheric composition is fascinating," she said, reviewing her tablet. Nitrogen-oxygen base, but with trace amounts of xenon that create hallucinations in most species. The gravity is 1.3 times Earth standard, and the temperature fluctuates between freezing and boiling depending on solar exposure. Marcus nodded, sketching what appeared to be a crude map in his notebook. "The predators," he said quietly. "How do they navigate the temperature changes?" "Thermal regulation, presumably. They're silicon-based rather than carbon, so they can withstand extreme heat. But we haven't had many opportunities to study them directly. The Kithara consider them sacred guardians of the trial." Marcus made more notes, his pencil moving in quick, precise strokes. Dr. Kim peered over his shoulder and was surprised to see not just maps, but detailed behavioral observations about the Kithara themselves, notes about their social hierarchy, their body language patterns, even speculation about their evolutionary history. "This is incredibly detailed," she said with genuine admiration. "How did you gather all this information?" "I watch," Marcus replied simply. "People don't notice when you're quiet." The departure ceremony took place in the Harmony's main docking bay. The 9 volunteers stood in their environmental suits, carrying standard survival gear and emergency beacons. War Master Thrax and 2 junior Kithara warriors had come to witness their departure. "You will be transported to the trial grounds at dawn," Thrax announced, his scales showing patterns of formal ceremony. "The moon's cycle is 7 of your days. Survive until the next dawn cycle, and you will be welcomed as honored allies. Fail." He let the implication hang in the air. Captain Rodriguez stepped forward to address his crew. "Remember, this isn't just about individual survival. You're representing humanity. Work together, watch each other's backs, and trust your training." The volunteers nodded, pumping themselves up with encouraging words and mutual support. All except Marcus, who stood slightly apart, his attention focused on the Kithara warriors. He had noticed something in their posture that troubled him, a tension that suggested they expected this trial to go badly for the humans. As they boarded the transport shuttle, Thompson clapped Marcus on the shoulder with false bravado. "Don't worry, quiet man. We'll keep you alive out there." Marcus simply nodded, but his dark eyes remained thoughtful. He had studied the Kithara for months, learned their language nuances, observed their cultural patterns. Something about this trial felt wrong. The Kithara were honorable warriors, but they were also practical. They wouldn't waste time on a trial that humans could easily pass. Which meant either the moon was more dangerous than they had been told, or the trial itself had hidden complexities that no amount of physical preparation could overcome. The shuttle descended through the moon's atmosphere, its hull shuddering against the toxic winds. Through the viewports, the volunteers could see the desolate landscape below, sharp mountain ranges that looked like broken teeth, valleys filled with glowing mist, and strange formations that might have been crystal forests or massive boneyards. "Beautiful," Dr. Kim murmured, her scientific curiosity overriding her apprehension. "Looks like hell," Thompson muttered, checking his weapon for the 5th time. Marcus said nothing, but his notebook was out again, filled with observations about the terrain patterns, atmospheric effects, and the way the landscape seemed to shift in the planet's strange light. While others prepared for battle, he prepared to understand. The shuttle landed with a bone-jarring impact on a relatively flat plateau surrounded by towering spires of black rock. As the doors opened, the volunteers got their first taste of the moon's environment. Even through their suits' filtration systems, they could sense the alien quality of the air, the weight of the gravity, the subtle wrongness that marked this place as fundamentally hostile to human life. War Master Thrax's voice crackled through their communication systems. "The trial begins now. May your strength prove your worth." The shuttle lifted off immediately, leaving the 9 humans alone on the alien moon. They stood in a circle, weapons ready, scanning the seemingly empty landscape for threats. The silence was complete except for their own breathing and the whisper of alien wind across the rocky spires. "All right, people," Security Chief Barnes took command. "First priority is establishing a defensive position. Thompson, get us shelter. Kim, start mapping the local environment. Everyone else, perimeter watch." The team moved with military precision, years of training taking over. Marcus remained with the group but stayed on the edges, continuing his observations. While others focused on immediate survival needs, he studied the broader patterns, the way shadows fell across the landscape, the subtle variations in rock color that might indicate mineral composition, the complete absence of visible life despite their briefings about deadly predators. As they worked to establish their base camp, none of them noticed the shapes moving in the deeper shadows between the spires. Ancient things that had learned patience over millennia, waiting for the right moment to test these newest challengers. The Kithara had not lied about the trial's dangers, but they had not revealed its true nature either. Marcus felt eyes watching them from the darkness. His hand moved unconsciously to his notebook, where he had sketched possible escape routes and defensive positions based on the terrain patterns he had observed during their descent. While his teammates prepared for a straightforward survival challenge, Marcus prepared for war. The trial had begun, and already he sensed that everything they thought they knew about this moon was wrong. But Marcus had been wrong about things before, had been underestimated and dismissed. He had learned to be patient, to watch, and to act when the moment was right. On this Deathworld moon, surrounded by ancient predators and hidden dangers, Marcus Chen, the silent observer, the quiet one who never spoke up, was about to discover exactly who he really was. The first day was ending, and the real trial was just beginning. The attack came at sunset on their second day. The team had made good progress establishing their camp in a natural depression between three massive rock spires. Thompson's engineering expertise had created a shelter that could withstand the moon's temperature extremes, while Dr. Kim had mapped the immediate area and identified several potential water sources in the crystalline formations nearby. Security Chief Barnes had established patrol routes and defensive positions, confident in their ability to handle whatever predators the moon might throw at them. Marcus had spent those 2 days doing what he always did, watching. While others worked on immediate survival needs, he had observed patterns that troubled him. The way certain rocks seemed to shift position between morning and evening. The complete absence of any life signs despite clear evidence of extensive mineral deposits that should have supported some kind of ecosystem. Most importantly, the feeling of being constantly observed by something just beyond the range of their sensors. He had tried to share his concerns with Security Chief Barnes during the first evening's briefing. The positioning of these rock formations, he had said quietly, spreading his notebook sketches across their makeshift table. They form natural corridors that funnel movement toward our camp. Barnes had glanced at the drawings dismissively. "That's just geography, Marcus. We chose this position because it's defensible. 3 approaches, clear sightlines, good cover. But what if something wanted us to choose this position?" Marcus had asked. The question had earned him looks of irritation from the rest of the team. Dr. Kim had tried to be diplomatic. "Marcus, your observations are valuable, but we can't second-guess every decision based on paranoia." Thompson had been less kind. "Maybe leave the tactical planning to people who actually know what they're doing, okay?" Marcus had nodded and retreated back into silence, but he had continued his observations. Something was orchestrating their experience on this moon, something intelligent enough to manipulate their choices while remaining invisible to their technology. The attack began with sound. A low rumble that seemed to come from everywhere at once, vibrating through the ground and the air simultaneously. The team immediately went to defensive positions, weapons ready, scanning for targets. Their motion sensors showed nothing. Thermal imaging revealed only the familiar heat signatures of the crystalline formations. "Could be seismic activity," Dr. Kim suggested, checking her geological readings. "This moon has significant tectonic instability." But Marcus had seen something the others missed. In his peripheral vision, for just an instant, one of the distant rock spires had moved. Not shifted or settled, moved with purpose, like a living thing adjusting its position. The second wave of sound was different. Higher pitched, almost musical, but with an underlying harmony that made human inner ears ache with wrongness. This time, everyone noticed the movement. The rock spires weren't rocks at all. They were creatures, massive, ancient beings that had stood motionless for so long that minerals had crystallized on their hides, making them indistinguishable from natural formations. Now they were awakening, unfolding limbs that span hundreds of meters, raising heads that scraped the toxic clouds above. "Holy shit," Thompson whispered, his engineering mind struggling to process the impossible scale of what he was seeing. "Those things are bigger than starships." The creatures, the team would later learn the Kithra called them stone singers, began to move with surprising grace for their massive size. They didn't attack directly. Instead, they began to reshape the landscape itself, their enormous limbs pushing aside actual rock formations like children rearranging building blocks. Within minutes, the natural corridors that had guided the humans to their defensive position became a maze of shifting passages, with walls that moved and closed off escape routes with deliberate intelligence. The team found themselves trapped in an increasingly confined space while massive beings circled them like sharks around a sinking ship. This isn't a survival trial, Dr. Kim realized with growing horror. It's a puzzle. They're testing our ability to solve a problem under pressure. Security Chief Barnes had come to the same conclusion, but his solution was predictably straightforward. Everyone stay together. We fight our way to higher ground and radio for emergency extraction. With what weapons? Thompson demanded, staring up at creatures whose smallest appendages were larger than their entire camp. Our plasma rifles might as well be spitballs. The team began to panic. Their military training had prepared them for combat with hostile aliens, dangerous wildlife, even environmental hazards. But they had no protocols for dealing with living mountains that could rewrite geography at will. Marcus remained calm, continuing to observe and make notes even as chaos erupted around him. While others focused on the immediate threat of the massive creatures, he studied their behavior patterns. The stone singers moved with purpose, but not malice. They weren't trying to crush the humans, they were hurting them, guiding them towards something. "They're not attacking," he said quietly. "What?" Barnes snapped, too stressed to maintain his usual dismissive tone. "The creatures. They could have stepped on us already. Instead, they're changing the landscape to force us to move in specific directions." Marcus pointed to his sketches, showing the evolving maze of rock walls. "They're guiding us somewhere." Dr. Kim looked at his notes with new respect. "A behavioral test? But what are they testing for?" Before Marcus could answer, the ground beneath their feet began to move. Not the violent shaking of an earthquake, but a slow, deliberate tilting as one of the stone singers adjusted the plateau they stood on. The team had to grab each other to avoid sliding into the new canyons opening around them. "Whatever they want, we need to move," Barnes ordered. "Marcus, if you're right about them guiding us, which direction?" For the first time in his life, Marcus found everyone looking to him for answers. The quiet observer was being asked to lead. The irony wasn't lost on him. In a trial designed to test strength and courage, it was his pattern recognition and analytical skills that might save them. He studied the maze of walls and passages that the stone singers had created. There was a logic to it, a design that reminded him of something familiar. Ancient human puzzles, the kind found in archaeological sites across Earth. Labyrinths that weren't meant to confuse, but to teach. "There," he said, pointing to a narrow passage between two moving walls. "They're creating a path, but we have to take it at the right time." The team moved quickly through the shifting maze, with Marcus navigating and Barnes providing tactical coordination. Every few minutes, the landscape would reconfigure itself, opening new paths while closing others. It became clear that timing was crucial. Move too slowly, and passages would close. Move too quickly, and they would outpace the guidance the creatures were providing. Dr. Kim was fascinated despite their danger. "This is incredible. They're running us through some kind of intelligence test. But why? What are they measuring?" "Adaptability," Marcus answered without hesitation. "The Kithra value strength, but this trial isn't really about physical prowess. It's about how a species responds to the unknown." They navigated through 3 more reconfigurations before reaching what appeared to be their destination, a circular clearing surrounded by towering walls that the stone singers had arranged in a perfect amphitheater. In the center stood something that definitely wasn't natural, a crystalline structure about the height of a human, humming with internal energy. "That's technology," Thompson said with certainty. "Advanced stuff, too. Look at those energy patterns." As they approached the crystal, holographic displays activated around them. Images of various alien species appeared in the air, some recognizable from Federation records, others completely unknown. Each image was accompanied by data streams that their translation software struggled to interpret. "It's a test archive," Dr. Kim breathed. "Records of every species that's attempted this trial." The images told a story. Species after species had been brought to this moon, guided through the maze, and brought to this chamber. Most had failed in ways that the holograms documented with uncomfortable detail. Some had tried to fight the Stone Singers, others had panicked and made fatal errors in navigation, still others had simply given up when faced with challenges beyond their comprehension. But some had succeeded. The successful species shared certain characteristics: they adapted quickly to new information, they worked together under pressure, and, most importantly, they listened to members of their group who might otherwise be overlooked. The Kithara aren't just testing our strength, Marcus realized. They're testing whether humanity can recognize and utilize all its members' capabilities, not just the obvious ones. A new hologram appeared, images of previous human attempts. Marcus counted 7 different groups over the past century. All had failed, but the archive showed why. In every case, the human groups had defaulted to rigid military hierarchies, relying entirely on their strongest and most aggressive members while ignoring the insights of support personnel. "They've been testing us for 100 years, Barnes said grimly. "How many teams have we lost to this thing?" "Not lost," Marcus corrected, studying the data more carefully. "Rejected. The Stone Singers always return failed candidates safely to their ships. But the Kithara marked humanity as potential and proven. We got one more chance to demonstrate our worth." The crystal structure pulsed brighter, and new displays activated. This time, the images showed current events: the Harmony in orbit, Captain Rodriguez pacing the bridge with worry, War Master Thrax observing everything with calculating eyes. "This is our final test," Dr. Kim understood. "Not just survival, but proof that humans can value different kinds of intelligence." The holographic archive presented them with a new challenge. Complex mathematical sequences appeared in the air, but not the kind that could be solved through pure computation. These were pattern recognition puzzles that required intuitive leaps, the kind of thinking that Marcus had specialized in his entire life. But the crystal wouldn't accept input from him alone. The interface required consensus, the entire team had to agree on each answer before proceeding. For the first time, Marcus's quiet observations and pattern recognition skills were essential, but only if his teammates trusted him enough to follow his lead. Thompson looked at the swirling equations with growing panic. "I'm an engineer, not a mathematician. And these aren't even following standard mathematical principles." "They're not mathematics," Marcus said. "They're behavioral modeling. The Stone Singers are asking us to predict how different species will react in various scenarios." He began explaining his reasoning for each answer, pointing out subtle patterns in the data that indicated psychological responses rather than logical calculations. Slowly, his teammates began to understand. The quiet man they had dismissed as antisocial was revealing an incredible ability to read complex behavioral data. "How long have you been able to do this?" Dr. Kim asked with amazement as they worked through the puzzles together. "Always," Marcus replied. "I just learned early that people don't like being analyzed." Barnes watched Marcus work with growing respect. "Jesus, Marcus. If you can read alien psychology this accurately, why aren't you running the diplomatic corps?" "Because I don't like talking," Marcus said simply. "But I listen very well." As they progressed through the challenges, the team dynamics shifted. Barnes still provided tactical leadership, but he began asking Marcus for insights before making decisions. Thompson started consulting Marcus's notes when interpreting the technological displays. Dr. Kim found that Marcus's behavioral observations complemented her scientific analysis in ways that made both more effective. For the first time in his life, Marcus wasn't being tolerated or dismissed. He was being valued for exactly what he was, a quiet observer whose different perspective was essential to their collective success. The final challenge appeared as the moon's strange sun set on their third day. The crystal structure opened to reveal a chamber filled with more advanced technology than humanity had ever seen. But accessing it required something more complex than solving puzzles. The Stone Singers gathered around their amphitheater, their massive forms creating a circle of living mountains. Their musical communication filled the air, translated by their equipment as a simple question: "Who speaks for your species?" Barnes stepped forward instinctively, but Marcus caught his arm. "Wait," he said quietly. "Look at the patterns." The holographic archive was showing new data records of successful species and how they had answered this same question. In every case, the species that earned the Stone Singer's approval had chosen representatives who embodied their entire civilization's potential, not just their most obvious strengths. "They don't want our strongest leader," Marcus explained. "They want someone who represents all of humanity's capabilities." The team looked at each other with new understanding. Marcus wasn't the strongest or the most diplomatic or the most technologically skilled. But he was the one who had guided them through every challenge, whose quiet observations had proven essential again and again. "Marcus," Dr. Kim said with certainty, "you speak for us." The quiet man who had spent his entire life on the periphery stepped forward to represent his entire species. The Stone Singers waited to judge whether humanity was worthy of joining the galactic community. Everything would depend on what Marcus said next. Marcus stood in the center of the crystal chamber, surrounded by living mountains whose eyes glowed with ancient intelligence. The weight of representing his entire species pressed down on him like the moon's heavy gravity. For someone who had spent his life avoiding attention, the irony was overwhelming. The Stone Singers' musical communication filled the air around him, translated by their equipment into concepts rather than words. They were asking him to explain humanity's place in the universe, to justify why his species deserved to join the galactic community. But Marcus understood that the real question went deeper than politics or technology. They wanted to know what made humans unique. "My teammates think I should speak for humanity because I guided them through your trials," Marcus began, his quiet voice somehow carrying clearly in the vast space. "But that's not why I'm here. I'm here because my people finally learned to listen to voices they usually ignore." The Stone Singers' massive heads tilted with interest. The holographic displays around the chamber began showing new data, psychological profiles of the human team, analysis of their group dynamics, records of how they had adapted during the trials. "Every species you've tested has strengths," Marcus continued, studying the archive data that swirled around him. "The Kithara have honor and physical prowess. The Zenthari have technological brilliance. The Vosk have psychic abilities that let them communicate across star systems. But humans..." He paused, organizing thoughts he had never spoken aloud. "Humans are broken." His teammates tensed behind him. That wasn't the inspiring speech they had expected. But Marcus pressed on, his dark eyes reflecting the crystal's glow as he spoke truths he had observed his entire life. "We come from a Deathworld, yes. But not because our planet is physically harsh. Earth is dangerous because it forces its inhabitants to be contradictory. We're social creatures who need solitude. We're logical beings driven by emotion. We're individuals who can only survive as a collective. Every human is a walking paradox." The archive display shifted, showing Earth's history, wars and peace treaties, scientific breakthroughs born from military research, cooperation arising from competition. The Stone Singers watched as Marcus explained patterns that other species had missed. "Other civilizations see our contradictions as weakness. The Kithara think we're honorable warriors who betray our own principles. The Zenthari see us as brilliant scientists who waste our potential on conflicts. They're all right, and they're all wrong." Dr. Kim realized what Marcus was doing. He wasn't just explaining humanity's nature, he was reframing it entirely. The quiet observer who had spent his life studying human behavior was revealing insights that could change how the galaxy viewed his species. "Our contradictions aren't flaws," Marcus continued. "They're adaptations. A species that developed on a world where cooperation and competition were both necessary for survival. Where being too social made you vulnerable, but being too isolated meant death. Where logic was essential, but pure rationality couldn't account for variables beyond measurement." The Stone Singers' musical voices rose in harmony, a sound their translators struggled to interpret. Marcus sensed approval, but also testing. They wanted him to go deeper. "That's why your trials confused the other human teams," he said with growing confidence. "They approached each challenge as a problem to be solved through strength or intelligence or determination. But your trials aren't puzzles, they're mirrors. You're not testing whether we can overcome obstacles. You're testing whether we understand ourselves." The chamber's crystal walls began to pulse with new patterns, displaying scenes from across human space. The Stone Singers were accessing Federation databases, studying human colonies and achievements with fresh perspective based on Marcus's words. "Look at our colonies," Marcus said, interpreting the displays. "Every other species spreads by replicating their homeworld's conditions. They terraform planets to match their biology and build identical cities across the galaxy. But humans adapt differently." The displays showed human settlements on ice worlds where people had learned to build with snow and ice, desert planets where cities existed underground, even space stations where entire generations had been born in artificial gravity. Each colony was unique, shaped by local conditions rather than imposed templates. "We don't transform worlds to suit us," Marcus explained. "We transform ourselves to suit the worlds. Because that's what we learned on Earth. Survival means being flexible enough to thrive in any environment." Thompson stared at the displays with new understanding. "That's why our engineering is so chaotic compared to other species. We don't have standard designs because we're always adapting to new conditions." "And our diplomacy," Dr. Kim added. "Other species negotiate based on fixed cultural principles. But humans change our approach based on who we're talking to." Marcus nodded, but the Stone Singers weren't finished testing him. New displays appeared, records of human conflicts, wars that had consumed entire planets, atrocities that other species pointed to as evidence of humanity's fundamental flaws. "You see our violence," Marcus acknowledged, his voice steady despite the horrific images surrounding him. "The other species in this galaxy fear us because we're the only ones who wage war on ourselves. The Kithara fight other species for honor. The Zenthari compete with rivals for resources. But humans..." He paused, studying images of Earth's bloodiest conflicts. "Humans fight ourselves because we understand that our greatest enemy is our own potential for evil. Every war we've fought has been against versions of ourselves we refuse to become. We battle our own darkness to become something better." The Stone Singers' music shifted to lower tones, their massive forms leaning closer. This was the core of their evaluation, whether humanity's capacity for violence made them too dangerous for galactic society, or whether it represented something more complex. "Other species achieve peace through unity," Marcus explained. "Everyone thinks the same way, wants the same things, follows the same rules. But human peace comes from diversity, from people who disagree learning to coexist anyway. Our strength isn't that we're unified. Our strength is that we're not." Security Chief Barnes understood what Marcus was revealing. "That's why our military tactics confuse other species. They expect us to follow doctrine, but every human commander fights differently." "And our science," Dr. Kim added with excitement. "Other species advance through steady, logical progression. But human breakthroughs come from connecting ideas that don't seem related." Marcus gestured to his teammates, who had become living examples of his thesis. "Look at us. Barnes is a warrior who learned to value intelligence. Kim is a scientist who learned to appreciate tactics. Thompson is an engineer who learned to think like an artist. I'm an observer who learned to lead." The Stone Singers' music reached a crescendo that made the crystal walls ring like bells. The archive display showed new data, analysis of successful galactic alliances, predictions about humanity's potential contributions, assessments of risks and benefits. "We're not asking to join your civilization because we're strong," Marcus said, his quiet voice carrying the weight of his species' hopes. "We're asking to join because we're different. Because in a galaxy where every species has perfected one way of thinking, humans offer something unique, the ability to think in every way at once." The crystal chamber fell silent except for the whisper of alien whine through the rock spires. The Stone Singers communicated among themselves in frequencies beyond human hearing, their massive forms perfectly still as they deliberated. Marcus waited with the patience he had learned from a lifetime of observation. His teammates stood behind him, no longer seeing him as the quiet outsider but as the perfect representative of everything that made humanity special. Finally, the largest Stone Singer stepped forward. Its voice, translated through the chamber's systems, carried the weight of geological ages. "You speak truly of your species' nature. But understanding oneself is not the same as proving worthiness. The galaxy is vast and dangerous. Diversity that strengthens in isolation may become weakness when faced with unified threats." New displays appeared, images of hostile alien empires at the galaxy's edge, machine intelligences that sought to eliminate organic life, cosmic threats that required coordinated responses from every civilized species. How does a race of individuals stand against forces that require absolute unity? The stone singer asked. Marcus studied the new information, his mind working through patterns and connections that others might miss. This was the final test, not just explaining humanity's nature, but demonstrating how it could serve the greater galactic good. Unity and uniformity aren't the same thing, he said finally. Other species achieve coordination by making everyone think alike. But humans coordinate by making sure everyone thinks differently. He pointed to the displays showing galactic threats. Look at how other species respond to unified enemies. They create unified responses, standardized tactics, coordinated strategies, everyone following the same plan. Which means if the enemy adapts to that plan, everyone fails together. The stone singers leaned closer, their ancient eyes focusing on Marcus with laser intensity. But humans would respond differently, he continued. Every human group would try a different approach. Some would fail, but others would succeed in ways no one expected. And the successful approaches would spread to other groups, creating new combinations and adaptations. Barnes realized what Marcus was describing. Distributed problem solving. Like evolution, but conscious. Exactly, Marcus said. Other species evolve slowly, over generations. But humans evolve tactically, during conflicts. We adapt in real time. Dr. Kim was already seeing the implications. That's why Earth developed so many different cultures. Each one was experimenting with different solutions to the same survival challenges. Marcus nodded, his confidence growing as his teammates understood and built on his ideas. The galaxy faces threats that require innovation, not just strength. Species that think alike will find the same solutions, which means they'll have the same vulnerabilities. But humans will find different solutions to every problem. The stone singer's music rose again, but this time with harmonies that suggested approval. The crystal chamber began to glow brighter, and new passages opened in its walls, not leading away, but leading deeper into the moon's hidden technology. You have passed the trial of understanding, the lead stone singer announced. But one test remains. The Kithara requested this trial to determine whether humans deserve alliance. We must determine whether the galaxy deserves humans. The chamber transformed around them, walls becoming transparent to reveal the vast network of technology hidden throughout the moon. This wasn't just a testing ground, it was a repository of knowledge accumulated over millions of years, a library containing the collected wisdom of hundreds of species. Every species we have tested has sought to prove their worthiness to join galactic civilization, the stone singer explained. But never before has a species made us question whether that civilization is worthy of them. Marcus felt the weight of that statement. The stone singers weren't just gatekeepers, they were guardians of something larger. The accumulated knowledge around them represented millions of years of galactic development, but also millions of years of stagnation. The current galactic order has brought peace, the stone singer continued, but also complacency. Each species has found its niche and remained there. Growth has stopped. Innovation has ceased. The galaxy has become predictable. The displays around them showed galactic maps spanning millennia. Territory controlled by each species had remained essentially unchanged for thousands of years. Trade routes followed ancient patterns. Even their conflicts were ritualized, following established protocols that everyone understood. But humans, Marcus said, beginning to understand the true scope of what was happening, would change all of that. Humans would destroy the current order, the stone singer confirmed. Not through war or conquest, but through adaptation. Your species cannot remain static. Wherever you go, you change things. Sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse, but always towards something new. Dr. Kim stared at the ancient knowledge surrounding them. You're not testing whether we're worthy of joining the galaxy. You're deciding whether to let us destabilize it. The question, the stone singer said, its massive head turning to look at each human in turn, is whether the galaxy needs the destabilization. Whether the peace we have built has become a prison. Marcus walked to one of the data displays, studying information about galactic civilization that no human had ever seen. Birth rates across all species had been declining for centuries. Technological innovation had slowed to a crawl. Even exploration of new worlds had become rare, everyone was content with what they already had. It's dying, he said quietly. Your civilization is dying from success. The stone singer's music carried notes of profound sadness. We have achieved everything we thought we wanted. Peace, prosperity, stability. But, in doing so, we may have lost everything we actually needed. Challenge, Thompson realized. Competition. The drive to improve. Conflict isn't always destructive, Barnes added. Sometimes it's how you grow. Marcus studied the data more carefully, his pattern recognition abilities working on a scale none of his teammates could match. He was seeing connections across millions of years of history, understanding cycles that span the rise and fall of entire civilizations. This has happened before, he said with growing certainty. Not just to your current civilization, but to previous ones. Species achieve perfect peace and stability, then slowly fade away. And, each time, it takes something disruptive to restart the cycle of growth. The Stone Singer's music rose in confirmation. 7 times, galactic civilization has risen to great heights, then stagnated and declined. Each time, a catalyst species has appeared to break the cycle. Species that could not be contained by existing order. New displays showed those previous catalyst species aliens whose very nature had forced their contemporaries to adapt or be left behind. Marcus saw the pattern immediately. Each catalyst species had been fundamentally unstable in some way, driven to change things around them. But each catalyst has also been dangerous, the Stone Singer warned. The power to restart civilization is also the power to destroy it entirely. 3 of the previous 7 cycles ended in galactic war rather than renewal. The chamber around them shifted again, showing possible futures. In some timelines, humanity joined galactic civilization and slowly adapted to existing norms, becoming just another stable species. In others, human adaptability sparked a new age of exploration and innovation. But, in the darkest projections, human volatility led to conflicts that consumed entire star systems. So what are you asking us? Barnes said bluntly. Whether we promise to be good? Whether we'll change the galaxy slowly instead of quickly? We cannot make that promise, Marcus said before anyone else could answer. Because we don't know what we'll become. That's the point, humans adapt to circumstances we can't predict. The Stone Singer leaned closer, its ancient eyes focusing on Marcus. And, if that adaptation leads to destruction? If your species' growth comes at the cost of others' extinction? Marcus was quiet for a long moment, feeling the weight of answering for his entire species. But, as he stood there, surrounded by the accumulated wisdom of millions of years, he realized that the question itself revealed the answer. Every species you've tested has come here seeking permission, he said finally. Asking for approval to join something that already exists. But, humans don't ask permission. We don't wait for approval. We adapt to what we find and change it into something new. The Stone Singer's music shifted to frequencies that made the crystal walls vibrate. Marcus sensed he was approaching the heart of the trial. If you wanted a species that would integrate peacefully into existing civilization, you shouldn't have tested humans, he continued. The fact that you brought us here means you already know what we are. The question isn't whether we'll disrupt the galaxy. The question is whether that disruption will create something better or something worse. And, you believe you can guide that outcome? The Stone Singer asked. Marcus shook his head. I believe we'll create outcomes nobody can predict, including us. That's what adaptation means, responding to situations you've never faced before with solutions you've never tried. Dr. Kim stepped forward, understanding dawning on her face. That's the real test, isn't it? Not whether we can promise to be safe, but whether we can acknowledge our own unpredictability and still choose to engage responsibly. The galaxy needs catalyst species, Thompson added. But, it also needs them to be aware of their own potential for both creation and destruction. Marcus nodded, his quiet voice gaining strength as he spoke for his species one final time. We can't promise we won't change the galaxy in ways that some species won't like. But, we can promise that we'll face the consequences of our choices. That we'll adapt to the problems we create, not just the ones we inherit. The Stone Singers fell silent for long minutes, their massive forms perfectly still as they communicated among themselves in frequencies beyond human perception. The crystal chamber pulsed with energy, and the displays around them showed calculations so complex that even Dr. Kim couldn't follow the mathematics. Finally, the lead Stone Singer spoke. 7 catalyst species before yours have stood in this chamber. 4 were approved and went on to restart galactic civilization. 3 were denied and remained isolated on their homeworlds until their eventual extinction. Marcus felt his teammates tense behind him. Everything came down to this moment, not just their mission's success, but possibly humanity's future among the stars. Of the 4 that were approved, the Stone Singer continued, one created the greatest flowering of art and science the galaxy had ever seen. One sparked an age of exploration that doubled the number of known habitable worlds. One developed technologies that eliminated scarcity across hundreds of systems. The displays showed those golden ages, civilizations reaching heights of achievement that current galactic society couldn't match. And, one, the Stone Singer said, its voice carrying the weight of cosmic tragedy, destroyed 17 billion lives before other species managed to contain them. The chamber fell silent except for the humans' breathing and the distant whisper of alien wind. Marcus understood that they were being trusted with knowledge that could break lesser species, the reality that growth and destruction were often indistinguishable until after the fact. You ask us to choose, Marcus said quietly. To approve or deny your species based on incomplete information about an unknowable future. To take responsibility for consequences that span millions of years. Yes, the Stone Singer confirmed. Marcus looked back at his teammates, seeing in their faces the same realization he felt. They weren't just representatives of humanity anymore, they were witnesses to the weight of cosmic responsibility, the terrible burden of shaping galactic history. Then, our answer, Marcus said, turning back to face the ancient beings who held his species' fate, is the only honest answer we can give. The Stone Singers waited, their massive forms poised between approval and rejection, between hope and caution, between the desire for renewal and the fear of catastrophe. Marcus took a breath and spoke the words that would determine humanity's place in the universe. The trial was about to end, and everything would change. We don't want your approval, Marcus said, his quiet voice carrying absolute certainty. And we don't need your permission. The Stone Singer's music stopped entirely. In the sudden silence, the only sound was the subtle hum of ancient technology and the breathing of 5 humans who had just heard their species reject the offer of galactic citizenship. Thompson started to speak, but Dr. Kim caught his arm. She understood what Marcus was doing, even if she wasn't sure it was wise. Explain, the lead Stone Singer commanded, its massive form leaning forward with what might have been interest or threat. Marcus walked deeper into the chamber, studying the displays that showed galactic civilization's slow decline. Every species that has stood in this chamber has asked the same question: how do we prove we're worthy of joining something greater than ourselves? But that's the wrong question. The crystalline walls began to pulse with new patterns as the Stone Singers processed this unexpected response. Marcus had spent his entire life watching patterns that others missed, and now he saw the pattern that even these ancient beings had been trapped in. The right question, he continued, is why should we want to join a civilization that's dying? Barnes tensed, recognizing the dangerous game Marcus was playing. Rejecting galactic civilization could mean humanity's permanent isolation, or worse. But Marcus pressed on, his pattern recognition abilities working on a cosmic scale. You've shown us the history. 7 previous cycles of growth and stagnation. Each time, a catalyst species breaks the cycle and restarts galactic development. But, each time, that same catalyst species eventually becomes part of the static civilization they were brought in to change. Dr. Kim realized what Marcus was proposing. You're saying the system itself is the problem. The current galactic order survives by absorbing anything that threatens it, Marcus explained, gesturing to the data streams around them. Catalyst species don't change the civilization changes them. Eventually, they become just another stable member of a stable community. The Stone Singer's music resumed, but at frequencies that their translators couldn't interpret. Marcus sensed massive intellects grappling with concepts they had never considered. But humans are different, Thompson said, beginning to understand Marcus's strategy. Humans can't be absorbed, Marcus confirmed. Because we don't have a fixed nature to be changed. We adapt constantly, in every generation, in every situation. The thing that makes us dangerous to galactic stability is the same thing that makes us immune to galactic stagnation. The chamber's displays shifted to show new projections, models of what might happen if humanity rejected galactic citizenship but remained active in local space. The results were chaotic, unpredictable, but undeniably dynamic. You're proposing to remain independent, the Stone Singer observed. To develop without guidance or oversight. I'm proposing that humanity do what we've always done, Marcus replied. Adapt to our environment. But, instead of adapting to fit into your civilization, we'll adapt by creating our own. The implications hit everyone simultaneously. Rather than joining galactic society as junior members, humanity would develop as a parallel civilization. They would interact with established species as equals rather than supplicants, trade partners rather than protected clients. That's incredibly risky, Dr. Kim pointed out. Without the protection of galactic law, without access to established trade networks. Without those things, we'll have to create our own solutions, Barnes realized. Just like we did on Earth. Marcus nodded, his quiet confidence growing as his teammates understood the vision. The galaxy has achieved peace through unity. But peace isn't the only valuable outcome. Growth, discovery, innovation, those things require diversity, competition, even conflict. The Stone Singers communicated among themselves in harmonies that made the crystal walls sing. Marcus watched their body language, reading patterns of excitement, concern, and something that might have been hope in beings whose thoughts span geological time. What you propose has never been attempted, the lead Stone Singer finally said. All previous catalyst species have either joined galactic civilization or been destroyed by it. None have established parallel development. Because they asked permission first, Marcus pointed out. They came here seeking approval for their role in galactic society. But humans don't need your approval to exist. The chamber transformed around them, walls becoming transparent to reveal the vast network of monitoring stations hidden throughout the moon. For the first time, the humans could see the true scope of the Stone Singers' operation, not just a testing ground, but an intelligence-gathering system that watched every species in the galaxy. We have observed your development for centuries, the Stone Singer admitted. Your species' growth has been unprecedented. Most species require millennia to advance from primitive agriculture to interstellar travel. Humans achieved the same progression in mere thousands of years. New displays showed humanity's rapid technological advancement compared to other species' development curves. Earth's history was compressed into a timeline that looked like an explosion compared to the steady, predictable growth patterns of established galactic civilizations. And your social development has been equally remarkable, another Stone Singer added, its voice carrying overtones of academic fascination. Most species achieve interstellar capability only after establishing global unity. But humans reach the stars while still maintaining dozens of distinct cultures. Marcus studied the comparative data with growing understanding. That's what makes us different. Other species grow by becoming more unified. Humans grow by becoming more diverse. Which brings us back to the fundamental question, the lead Stone Singer said. If humanity develops independently, what happens when your expansion encounters established galactic borders? The question hung in the crystalline air like a challenge. Every species in the galaxy had territories, trading rights, established claims to star systems and resources. Humanity's growth would inevitably bring them into conflict with existing powers. The same thing that happened when European explorers encountered the Americas, Thompson said grimly. Or when expanding human nations met each other on Earth. Conflict, Barnes added. Competition for resources. Possibly war. Dr. Kim shook her head. Not necessarily. Those historical examples involved contact between species at very different technological levels. But we'd be meeting galactic civilizations as rough equals. Marcus walked to a display showing current galactic territorial divisions, studying the patterns with his usual intense focus. The current system is based on species remaining in their designated areas. But that only works if everyone agrees to stay static. And humans won't stay static, the Stone Singer observed. We can't, Marcus confirmed. It's not in our nature. But that doesn't mean expansion has to be destructive. The Chamber's technology responded to his thoughts, projecting new models based on historical patterns of human interaction with other cultures. The results were complex, sometimes peaceful trade and mutual benefit, sometimes conflict and displacement, often unexpected hybrid developments that neither side had anticipated. Look at these patterns, Marcus said, highlighting successful historical exchanges. When humans encounter other cultures, we don't just compete with them. We learn from them. We adapt their ideas and combine them with our own. Dr. Kim leaned forward, studying the projections. Cultural fusion. Technological hybridization. Even biological mixing when compatible. Other galactic species maintain their purity, Barnes observed. They interact with aliens, but they don't become more alien themselves. But humans do, Marcus said with growing excitement. Every culture we've ever encountered has changed us, just like we've changed them. That's how we adapt, not by conquering other systems, but by becoming something new through interaction. The Stone Singer's music rose to frequencies that made the crystal walls ring like bells. The ancient beings were processing concepts that challenged millions of years of assumptions about how civilizations developed and interacted. What you describe is not expansion, the lead Stone Singer said slowly. It is evolution. Conscious, directed, but unpredictable. And, potentially contagious, another added. Other species that interact with humans may begin to adopt similar patterns of adaptation. Marcus nodded, his quiet voice carrying the weight of cosmic implications. That's the real choice you're making. Not whether to approve humanity's membership in galactic civilization, but whether to allow the possibility of galactic civilization changing into something unprecedented. The chamber fell silent except for the background hum of technology that had witnessed the rise and fall of empires spanning millions of years. The Stone Singers communicated among themselves in frequencies beyond human perception, their massive forms perfectly still as they grappled with a decision that could reshape the galaxy's future. Finally, the lead Stone Singer spoke. In 7 previous cycles, we have approved 4 catalyst species and denied 3. In each case, we made our decision based on our ability to predict and control the outcome. But what you propose is inherently beyond prediction or control. Marcus felt his teammates' tension, but he remained calm. He had spent his entire life being underestimated because others couldn't predict his behavior. Now he was asking ancient beings to embrace that same unpredictability on a galactic scale. The mathematical models show equal probability of positive and negative outcomes, another Stone Singer added. Independent human development could lead to a golden age of innovation and growth. Or it could trigger conflicts that destroy current galactic civilization entirely. The universe doesn't offer guarantees, Marcus said simply. Growth always involves risk. The question isn't whether we'll change things, we will. The question is whether you trust us to face the consequences of our choices. And learn from them, Dr. Kim added. And adapt to them, Thompson said. And take responsibility for them, Barnes concluded. The Stone Singer's music reached a crescendo that made the entire chamber vibrate. Then, abruptly, it stopped. Very well, the lead Stone Singer announced. For the first time in our recorded history, we approve a species not for membership in galactic civilization, but for independence from it. Marcus felt the weight of cosmic history shifting around them. Humanity had just been granted something unprecedented, the right to develop their own civilization while maintaining contact with the established galactic order. But, with that independence comes responsibility, the Stone Singer continued. You will be monitored. You will be evaluated. And if your development threatens the survival of other species, intervention will be swift and absolute. New displays appeared around them, showing the vast network of observation posts and monitoring stations that the Stone Singers maintained throughout the galaxy. Humanity would have freedom, but not privacy. We understand, Marcus said, speaking for his species one final time. We'll earn our place in the universe the same way we've earned everything else, by proving ourselves through our actions. The crystal chamber began to glow with new intensity, and passages opened that led deeper into the moon's hidden technology. But these weren't test chambers, they were gift repositories, containing knowledge and tools that the Stone Singers had accumulated over millions of years. Traditional catalyst species receive guidance in joining galactic civilization, the Stone Singer explained. But, since you have chosen independence, you will receive something different: resources to help you chart your own path. Marcus walked through the opening passages with his teammates, their quiet observer finally, taking the lead as humanity stepped into an uncertain but unlimited future. The silent one who had always been overlooked was now guiding his species toward a destiny nobody could predict. Behind them, the Stone Singers began to sing not the testing harmonies they had used during the trials, but something new. Music that had never been heard before, created for a species that couldn't be categorized. The trial was ending, but humanity's real test was just beginning. 10 years had passed since the Deathworld trial, and the galaxy was no longer the same. Marcus Chen stood on the observation deck of the research station New Horizon, watching human ships move through space alongside vessels from a dozen different species. But these weren't the rigid, predictable formations of traditional galactic civilization. Instead, the mixed fleets moved with the chaotic efficiency that had become humanity's trademark, each ship following its own optimal course while somehow maintaining perfect coordination with the whole. He was no longer the quiet observer hiding in the background. The man who had once preferred solitude now served as Earth's primary liaison to the Stonesingers, a position that required him to speak for humanity on cosmic matters. But success hadn't changed his fundamental nature. Marcus still preferred watching and listening to talking, still found patterns that others missed, still kept detailed notes in worn notebooks. The difference was that now people listened when he finally spoke. The Zenthari delegation is requesting another meeting, Dr. Kim reported as she joined him at the viewport. She had been promoted to head the new Department of Xenocultural Adaptation, a field that hadn't existed before humanity's independent development began changing how species interacted. Third one this month, Marcus observed, making a note in his current notebook. Their council is getting nervous about the hybridization projects. Through the viewport, they could see one of those projects, a massive space station jointly constructed by human engineers and Zenthari technicians. The design followed neither species' traditional architecture, instead creating something entirely new that incorporated the best elements of both approaches. Can you blame them? Kim asked with a slight smile. 6 months ago, they were the galaxy's technological leaders. Now their young engineers are abandoning traditional designs to experiment with human adaptive methodologies. Marcus noted, understanding the deeper implications. The galaxy's established species had spent millennia perfecting stable, predictable systems. But exposure to humanity's chaotic innovation was inspiring their own people to question those ancient approaches. It's not just the Zenthari, he said, pointing to another section of space where Kithara warships were conducting joint exercises with human vessels. Look at their formations. Traditional Kithara tactics emphasize honor and direct confrontation. But now they're incorporating human-style adaptability into their strategies. The results were visible even to untrained observers. The mixed formations moved with deadly grace, combining Kithara strength with human unpredictability in ways that made both species more effective than either could be alone. Warmaster Thrax says it's the most significant evolution in Kithara military thinking in over 1,000 years, Kim reported. Their young warriors are calling it honorable adaptability. Marcus smiled at that. The Kithara had found a way to incorporate human flexibility while maintaining their cultural values, exactly the kind of hybrid development he had predicted during the trial. A soft chime indicated an incoming message. The holographic display showed Captain Rodriguez, now Admiral Rodriguez and commander of the Terran Independent Fleet. His hair had gone gray in the 10 years since the trial, but his eyes held a confidence that hadn't been there before. Marcus, we've got a situation developing in the outer spiral. The hegemony is pushing against the neutral zones again, and the established species are requesting human intervention. The hegemony was one of the galaxy's oldest and most conservative civilizations, strongly opposed to the changes that human independence had triggered. They viewed humanity's influence on other species as a contamination of galactic purity, and had been pushing for restrictions on human expansion. What kind of intervention? Marcus asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. The kind only humans can provide, Rodriguez replied. The hegemony's ships follow traditional battle doctrines, predictable formations, established tactics, responses based on millions of years of precedent. The neutral species needs someone who can think outside their established patterns. Through the viewport, Marcus could see human ships beginning to move not in the rigid formations of traditional space navies, but in the flowing, adaptive patterns that had become their signature. Each vessel would respond to battle conditions independently while somehow maintaining perfect coordination with the fleet. Admiral Thompson's engineering corps has been working on some new adaptive systems, Kim added. Ship designs that can reconfigure themselves during combat based on tactical requirements. Marcus made more notes, his pattern recognition abilities working on the strategic implications. The galaxy was dividing into two camps, species embracing human-influenced change, and species desperately trying to maintain traditional stability. The conflict was inevitable. The Stonesingers are requesting a consultation, Rodriguez continued. They want to discuss the broader implications of human intervention in galactic politics. That was the conversation Marcus had been expecting. The ancient beings had given humanity independence on the condition that they take responsibility for the consequences of their choices. Now those consequences were reshaping the entire galaxy. I'll head to the trial moon immediately, Marcus said. Kim, coordinate with Thompson's team on the new ship designs. If we're going to intervene in this conflict, we need to be ready for responses we've never seen before. The journey to the Stone Singer's moon took 3 days aboard the fastest human vessel, a ship that incorporated adaptive technology based on principles learned during their initial trials. Marcus spent the time reviewing reports from across human space, tracking the ripple effects of their independent development. The changes were remarkable. Human colonies had established trade relationships with over 30 different species, but, unlike traditional galactic commerce, these relationships were constantly evolving. Humans didn't just buy and sell goods, they shared techniques, adapted technologies, and created hybrid solutions to problems that had puzzled galactic civilizations for millennia. More importantly, other species were beginning to adopt human approaches to their own challenges. The rigid caste systems of several traditional civilizations had started to loosen as their people were exposed to human concepts of individual adaptation. Ancient territorial disputes were being resolved through human-style negotiation techniques that focused on mutual benefit rather than zero-sum competition. But, the changes had also created instability. Species that had remained unchanged for thousands of years were experiencing internal conflicts as progressive factions pushed for reform while conservative elements fought to maintain traditional ways. The hegemony represented the extreme conservative position. They wanted to eliminate human influence entirely, even if it required military force. When Marcus arrived at the trial moon, he found the Stone Singers waiting in the same crystal chamber where he had first spoken for humanity. But, the chamber itself had evolved, incorporating new technologies and design elements that showed clear human influence. The ancient pattern is breaking, the lead Stone Singer announced without preamble. Previous catalyst species created temporary disruptions before being absorbed into galactic stability. But, human influence continues to spread and intensify. Marcus studied the displays around him, watching real-time data streams showing change cascading through galactic civilization. It was like watching evolution in fast-forward, as species that had been static for millennia suddenly began adapting and developing at unprecedented rates. "Is that a problem?" he asked. "Unknown," the Stone Singer replied. "Our mathematical models cannot predict outcomes for the current situation. The variables are increasing exponentially." New displays appeared, showing the growing divide between progressive and conservative factions across the galaxy. The hegemony led a coalition of traditional species that viewed change as corruption, while a growing alliance of adaptive civilizations embraced human-influenced innovation. "The hegemony has issued ultimatums," another Stone Singer reported. "They demand that human expansion be limited to specifically designated regions of space. They view unrestricted human contact as an existential threat to galactic civilization." Marcus walked deeper into the chamber, studying patterns that span hundreds of star systems. The conflict was bigger than simple territorial disputes or resource competition. It was a fundamental disagreement about the nature of civilization itself. "They're not wrong," he said finally. "Human influence is an existential threat to traditional galactic civilization. The question is whether that's a bad thing." The Stone Singer's music shifted to frequencies that conveyed complex uncertainty. These beings had overseen galactic development for millions of years, but they were facing a situation completely outside their experience. Traditional civilization provided stability, predictability, and peace for thousands of years, the lead Stone Singer pointed out. The current changes threaten all of those achievements. But they also offer growth, innovation, and adaptation, Marcus countered. The galaxy you're trying to preserve was already dying from its own success. We're not destroying it, we're giving it a chance to evolve. New projections appeared around them, showing possible futures based on current trends. In some timelines, the growing conflict led to galaxy-spanning wars that consumed entire civilizations. In others, the progressive and conservative factions found ways to coexist peacefully. But, in the most intriguing projections, something entirely new emerged: a galactic civilization that combined the stability of traditional order with the adaptability of human innovation. That's what we're really fighting for, Marcus realized, studying the hybrid futures. Not victory over the conservative species, but the right to prove that change and stability can coexist. The hegemony will not accept coexistence, the Stone Singer warned. Their leaders view any change as the beginning of chaos. They will fight to preserve traditional order even if it requires eliminating every species that threatens it. Marcus nodded, understanding the tragic irony. The hegemony's desperate attempt to preserve galactic civilization would likely destroy it more thoroughly than any human innovation ever could. "Then, we need to demonstrate an alternative," he said. Show them that adaptation doesn't require the destruction of everything valuable from the past. The Chamber's technology responded to his thoughts, projecting new models based on successful human historical examples of cultural integration. Times when expanding civilizations had incorporated existing cultures rather than simply replacing them. The Roman Empire, Marcus said, highlighting patterns from Earth's history. They conquered new territories, but they also adopted the best ideas from conquered peoples. They grew stronger by becoming more diverse, not more uniform. And the early American colonies, he continued, showing another example. Multiple distinct cultures developing in parallel while sharing common principles and mutual support. The Stone Singers processed these historical examples with interest, their massive intellects analyzing patterns that might apply to galactic-scale civilization. You propose a confederation rather than a unified empire, one of them observed. Species maintaining their distinct identities while participating in common development. Exactly, Marcus confirmed. The hegemony thinks civilization requires uniformity. But humans have proven that diversity can be just as stable, and much more adaptable. The displays around them began showing new projections, models of how galactic civilization might develop if progressive and conservative species found ways to coexist without forcing conformity on each other. But implementation would require resolving the current conflict, the Stone Singer pointed out. The hegemony will not negotiate as long as they view human influence as an existential threat. Marcus studied the strategic situation, his pattern recognition abilities working on the political and military implications. The hegemony was powerful, but their strength came from unity and predictability, exactly the kind of rigid thinking that human tactical adaptability was designed to overcome. We don't need to defeat them militarily, he said. We need to demonstrate that their fears are unfounded. Show them that species can change and grow without losing what makes them valuable. A new plan began to form in his mind, based on understanding patterns of fear and adaptation that he had observed throughout his life. The hegemony wasn't really fighting humans, they were fighting their own terror of change. And the best way to overcome fear was through gradual exposure to positive examples. I need to coordinate with Admiral Rodriguez, Marcus said. And arrange meetings with leaders from both progressive and conservative factions. The Stone Singers' music rose to frequencies that conveyed something like approval mixed with deep concern. What you propose will require unprecedented diplomatic coordination, the lead Stone Singer warned. Success could create a new model for galactic civilization. Failure could trigger the most destructive war in recorded history. Marcus looked around the crystal chamber one final time, remembering the quiet observer he had been 10 years ago. That man would never have imagined standing in this place, planning strategies that would affect billions of lives across hundreds of worlds. But he had learned that sometimes the quiet ones, the people who watch and listen instead of demanding attention, are the ones who see solutions that others miss. I spent my whole life being underestimated because I was different, he said quietly. Maybe it's time to help the galaxy learn that different doesn't have to mean dangerous. The Stone Singers began to sing not their testing harmonies, but something new. Music that combined ancient patterns with innovative variations, traditional melodies enhanced by unprecedented improvisations. A perfect metaphor for what Marcus hoped galactic civilization could become. As he prepared to leave the trial moon and return to human space, Marcus knew that his greatest test was still ahead. He had proven that humanity could earn its independence. Now he had to prove that independence could coexist with interdependence, that chaos could enhance order instead of destroying it. The silent one who had always watched from the shadows was about to step into the light of galactic history. And the outcome would determine whether the galaxy evolved into something greater, or collapsed under the weight of its own fear of change. The real trial was just beginning, and, this time, the entire galaxy was watching. Through the viewport of his ship, Marcus could see human vessels moving to intercept hegemony forces at the edge of neutral space. Each ship followed its own optimal course while somehow maintaining perfect coordination with the fleet, a living metaphor for the kind of civilization he hoped to create. In his notebook, Marcus wrote a single line, "Sometimes the greatest strength is learning when not to fight." The future of the galaxy would depend on whether anyone was wise enough to listen.